My approach to the Bible, personally, and why Christianity doesn't necessarily resonate so well with me, is because the Bible...
Oh my gosh.
Oh, you're losing your camera.
What's wrong? It's like, I'm being interviewed by friend Derek. It's just like, oh, what? Something about being gay. And you know, we just always went to church. Born in church. I grew up with other church families.
Growing up from the Catholic faith, it's obvious that, you know, homosexuality is definitely frowned upon.
Almost every church had a very anti-gay approach to life.
I just didn't fit in with everybody else. And it was a very cliquey kind of, oh, if you don't fit in with this kind of people, then, you know, you're just on the outside. And so that's what kind of happened with me.
Forming, this is us, this is you, we are against you, you know.
I didn't like how I felt when I went to church. It just felt like I could never do anything right. I just felt like the only thing I was taking away from it was more guilt than I was already putting on myself just in general.
I just started learning that you can't take the Bible literally.
I don't know, the Bible is a hard subject.
It was written a very long time ago by people who lived in a very different way in a very different time, under very different circumstances.
It was just a completely different belief about a lot of subjects back then. Even when it came to women and, you know, food.
Centuries and centuries of translation, that the meaning can be lost within a written text.
Because in other areas of the world, homosexuality is something to be celebrated, even, or is certainly at least okay.
I can't, you know, believe that, you know, God wouldn't love me, you know, just because I love someone else.
I believe I was created the way I was, and I don't believe I was ever had the choice to choose, you know, between being straight or homosexual, and that God wouldn't want me to not be myself.
I would never allow myself to admit it, and I would never say it out loud, but I always knew something was different. And I felt like I was just trying to go through the motions. I was trying to have a girlfriend. It never worked out, obviously, because I just couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to it, and I could never make those kinds of connections. I just always ended up being really good friends with these girls. And I put on a whole show for everyone.
And I remember when I told my parents, I told them on the same day I found out I was going to be valedictorian, because I thought, well, here's some good news in case they don't take it so well.
I mean, it's obviously awkward. You're coming out and saying, you know, I'm a homosexual, I'm attracted to men. But knowing in the back of my mind, he's probably going to think, hey, he's attracted to me automatically, which isn't always the case.
It just started coming up to the surface, but I racked for at least a month or so, and there was periods when I was just crying, and I was just like punching the wall because I just didn't want to do it. I knew that my family wouldn't be happy with it. I didn't even want to think about how it would affect my mother. I was living with my dad at the time, so the thought of being kind of just stranded, I was so isolated. My mom was over here, it was just my dad. I was never close with my dad, I didn't grow up with him, so it seemed like a very strong possibility that if I had come out to him, it would be the streets, or me trying to find someplace else to stay.
In high school, obviously, I was treated, you know, differently, but I wasn't really open then in high school.
Like, I've heard such horror stories and people whose parents reacted so negatively, and my parents were never like that. It never made any difference at all, and I think the reason why is because I had established with my parents who I was.
My best friend in high school, when I came out to him, he totally disowned me. So, but not a true friend, like if you disown someone for that reason alone. That was rough.
But those are my friends, and they've actually stuck by me through that really bad period that I went through after coming out, in which I was just horribly depressed and just couldn't deal with myself, dealing with the self-guilt and self-loathing.
You know, being called faggot and all this other terminology was definitely difficult.
So if one person does it in their group, then that means they must all do it. Or if this is what the media portrays, then that, that must be what it really is like. Because, these people know what they're talking about.
A lot of people are blinded by stereotypes and maybe don't know enough gay people or don't know any and have never actually seen it or experienced, somebody else coming out or somebody else being attracted to somebody of the same sex. And they just assume that it's all about sex, and that's just not true.
It's all blown out a little bit. And I feel like sometimes in church, that's the kind of thing they focus on is, oh, they all do this, they all do that, and that's wrong, therefore they are wrong. And I'm just like, I don't do that. Can I just say that is not me?